You can hack your health with nature the easy way. In this video, I'm going to give you a brief, super simple overview on how to use nature to improve your health and how to guide your decision making skills when you are doing so. Because it's really simple at the end of the day. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Emmanuel Urbani. I've helped over 100 clients improve their health through nature first strategies, offering a support, safe space, and mastermind style group coaching. So, on to this video. How do you improve your health with nature the easy way? First of all, everything that you do needs to go by this simple lens. Does it imitate what I would be doing if I lived outside 24/7? If you were a traditional person many, many years ago, you would be outside at sunrise and you'd be outside from sunrise to sunset. You would wear leather soled shoes, or you would be barefoot, or you would wear fur shoes, like say you were way up north and you were wearing sealskin. Your clothes would be made of fur, leather, or nothing. And you would eat whatever grew there. It's really that simple. But we have an additional layer of hacks, if you want to call them that, which I don't really actually like calling them that we have to add because our environment looks radically different than it did back then. So every time you think to yourself, well, did we really do that? And I'll give you a couple examples in a second. You must first ask yourself, does my environment look the way it did back then? So for example, we didn't drink that much water. True say. But we also didn't live in a world surrounded by non-native EMFs and a declining magnetic field for the most part. Like the intensity has reduced regardless of where you are in the world right now. And we didn't live in a place with polluted water, a bunch of toxins, blah, 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 everywhere, high deuterium levels, possibly God knows what coming from space. So we need to up level what we would have done back then with certain hacks that would improve our health. And this goes in the line of other things that I've talked about on my YouTube channel, such as mitigating non-native EMFs, such as chewing mastic gum, baking soda in the water, carbonated water, deuterium depleted water, a couple more that I haven't mentioned yet that I will in the future. These things oftentimes when we're looking at what other people say, we don't want to be followers. We want to think for ourselves. And when you're thinking for yourself, there is a right way to question what someone is saying and a wrong way. I hate to say it, but it's true. And that is when you look at what someone's saying, I don't want you to ask yourself, is this true? And is it going to work for me? And how can I prove it? I want you to ask yourself, and this is, remember, the simple way, not the complicated way. I want you to ask yourself, what do I have to lose? And does this reflect nature? That's it. That's all you need to know. And everything else is an experiment at the end of the day. So if I'm listening to Dr. Jack Cruz talk about mastic gum, baking soda, and putting castor oil in your belly button or whatever, the question I have is, what do I have to lose? Well, I've got a bottle of castor oil. I don't have anything to lose there. Got baking soda in my fridge. Don't have anything to lose there. I got a soda machine, like to make carbonated water, I should say, soda stream, whatever. I have nothing to lose there. Mastic gum I can get for like $20 and try it. So the answer is I got nothing to lose. So if I'm going to try absolutely everything under the sun, then I design an experiment for myself. I'm going to go 30 days and I'm going to do all of these things at once. And then I'm going to see how I feel after those 30 days. And if you want to get fancy and you want to pull blood work, you can pull blood work before and after. I'm not saying your experiment should all just be 30 days. In some scenarios, that's too short, but it's just an example. And you don't necessarily have to go by blood work. Now, before you think to yourself, well, Emanuela, that's a lot of confounding factors. How do I know which one worked? Let's be honest. You live in a world that looks nothing like our world would have looked 200 years ago. So you don't just have one thing that's going to help you, you need to implement 5 to 10 things in order for you to get help. It's not one thing that's going to improve you, it's 5 to 10. Again, you cannot improve your health just with one thing. It's 5 to 10. Why? Because where you are today and your health problems today are a reflection of the straws that broke the camel's back. This is my favorite analogy because it just makes sense to me. You are the camel and your modern life is the straws. And imagine this. You're a camel and you've been around on this planet for 35 years. I'm older than that, but I'm just giving you that as an example. And every year, and possibly if your parents' environment sucked, let's say one of your parents was in the military, you were born with, I'm just giving you a random example here, 20 straws on the camel's back. And as you go through life and you do your job, and maybe you work in tech, or maybe you work in a hospital, or maybe you work shift work, or maybe you work outdoors at a golf course, whatever, you're adding straws to the camel's back. And then very recently, your back was so full of straws that your back broke. But imagine you're this camel and I'm like, don't worry, I'm just going to remove the last straw off your back. What are you going to say? My back's still broken. No kidding, right? I have to remove all the straws on your back, or as many of them as I possibly can, because technically it would be impossible to remove all the straws on your back. And then we must rehabilitate your back and have your back heal before you can add any straws back. So when you are looking at all of these people touting these things, the questions you're going to ask yourself is, does it reflect nature? And what do I have to lose? So here's an example of something that I wouldn't do. For instance, there's someone promoting a supplemental cocktail of things that are going to improve mitochondrial function, and then telling you that you should pair that with red and infrared light therapy on a panel and some oxygen therapy. Well, none of those reflect nature, and a lot of those have too much of a risk, meaning I have too much to lose. For example, the supplements are going to increase deuterium, not because necessarily the supplements have extra deuterium in there, but because the act of processing something to extend its shelf life requires you to add deuterium in there. Otherwise, your supplements would not last on your shelf for so long. I challenge you to go look at your bottles of supplements and tell me how many years off is the expiry date. There's no way this would be possible without adding deuterium to your supplements. 2, if someone is telling you to use a red light panel, not that there's no use for those, but you have good sun and it's not clear that it's when you can't do that, or when it's freezing cold and it hasn't stopped raining, or you need to shorten the curve to get better, then the risk becomes higher than the reward. You look at a higher cost for a good quality panel, and if you're dealing with any major issues like cancer or growths of any kind, maybe nobody's explained to you that you want to emphasize certain wavelengths of light first, and not all light is created the same. However, if you go out into the sun, you're perfectly imitating nature and you have nothing to buy and nothing to lose. When it comes to the oxygen therapy, for example, oxygen therapy, 1, would have been something very unnatural. It does not reflect nature in any way. 2, because of how the modern world has screwed up with our ability to use oxygen, this in particular comes with dangers. So, to keep it simple, again, it is an attempt to reflect nature as much as possible, and an attempt to ask yourself, what do I have to lose? So if you were doing oxygen therapy and you have to pay a bunch of money for hyperbaric oxygen, for example, or an expensive oxygen machine, first of all, that could very well be a terrible idea depending on the situation for you. But second of all, you have a bunch to lose. So that's the really simple way. Of course, sometimes the cost is worth it, like deuterium depleted water, because it's something your body makes. So you're closely imitating nature. Let me finish off this short video by going through what is required to be healthy. You need to see the sunrise every day. you need to spend as much time outside as possible. Your indoor light must be seriously mitigated, and you want to allow the outside light to come inside. So open windows, except blocking blue and rich light, protecting your eyes and skin when you have to be indoors, mitigating non-native EMFs in your house, addressing the lack of magnetic field, since we're in a situation where the Earth's magnetic field is perpetually declining pretty much universally, then is something that we want to supplement. That will be a video that will go into more detail because I am doing more research on it for experimentation and options on myself. And I want to share with you my personal experiments and what has personally helped me. Then, of course, you want to eat seasonally. So you want your food to look like wherever you live, not where you're from. This is a key difference. So if you are in Canada, in Southern Ontario, like I am right at this moment, then you would be taking a look at what the farmers markets are growing and use your diet to reflect that. And if you have a lot of health problems, you want to take a further step back and think of what is native to where you actually live versus what has been added. For instance, tomatoes are not native to Ontario, but they are growing here. So technically you could eat them. But if you're autoimmune and you have a lot of issues, maybe you might want to stay away from those and narrow that down a bit. We definitely have native plants that are edible, and that would require a lot more research and understanding. So it's not really simple. But the idea is, think of industrial revolution foods. So like high grains, beans, depression foods that you're going to want to avoid, especially the bigger the issue is. Now, if you're growing beans in your backyard, I mean, I don't know. It depends on how bad off you are. I don't like beans. So to recap, you can heal yourself with nature the easy way. You want to take a look and imagine what you would have done as a traditional person many, many, many years ago, prior to electricity, prior to, settlers, prior to hiding indoors. And for the record, you do not want to think of what you would have been as a settler, because there is a drastic difference between the settlers and the traditional peoples all around the world. I'll give you an example. I don't know about you, but I read all the Little Girl in the Prairie books when I was young, and I distinctively remember the kids being told to cover themselves from the sun, keep all their skin covered, make sure they were wearing their bonnets, not go out barefoot, not get too cold in the thaws, not get too wet, not get too muddy, not get too much dirt on, and the list goes on and on. That doesn't reflect what we would have done as a traditional person whatsoever. And the Explorer reports are great reads to help guide you on what a traditional person would have done and how they lived, because that will change your perspective on things like mold, especially. I know it did for me. I remember when I was reading about the journey of the Karluk, which was an exploration to the North Pole. And I remember it struck me as so interesting, the descriptions of what they were eating and what they experienced when it came to mold. So like they experienced moldy blankets when the thaw came, meaning their furs and leathers, there was mold on them and everything, and they were sleeping on that on a regular basis. And then they had to be dried and aired out, and they had to move from their winter style dwellings to the summer style dwellings. Then they also ate a lot of moldy food and slimy meat, which was, again, really, really interesting to me. At the end of the day, improving your health with nature is super, super, super simple. Now, if you're struggling because your work life situation doesn't allow you to make this easy at all, this is where talking to someone, getting guidance, speaking with your peers, and kind of evaluating each other's choices and little tweaks and things that you can do depending on your individual situation becomes super useful. But at the end of it, even though it's not easy, it really is simple. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts. I love to go through your comments, and do be patient because sometimes it takes me a little bit of time. I'll catch you on the next one.